Hello and welcome to another episode of Disaster Empire Quick Views. This is the podcast where we talk to thought leaders and innovators in resilience. And we have a return guest. I'm so glad Mark, to see your face. And thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. And for those who aren't familiar with Mark Armour, he is going to be talking to us today about adaptive BCP and resilience. Mark, thank you so much for joining us again. So great to see you.
It is my pleasure. Good to be back, Ashley, and good to see you as well.
All right. Well, hey, let's dive right in because I know there's a lot of interest in, in adaptive BCP. And I think let's start off with, trying to help the audience think about, well, what is this? So could you give us a real world example of an organization who successfully implemented adaptive BCP and maybe how it helped them navigate a crisis or disruption? How can we make it real as we dive more into this topic?
Sure. So I know of a number of organizations that credit kind of their adaptive approach to their ability to respond and recover. Can't speak to them. I've got NDAs in place, or they keep some of the secret sauce secret. I can talk about my organization ranks at a very, very high level without revealing anything that's that would be proprietary. And let's start with what's the big thing over the past few years we've all dealt with. It's COVID-19 and the global pandemic. And I would say, with Adaptive's focus on principles, on collaboration, and less focus on following plans and procedures, as well as kind of de-emphasizing this pre-built priority and focus on objectives, when we know that when events strike, things are going to change, priorities will change for sure. And even services and products might have to be delivered in different ways. And this is what we saw following COVID-19. And just to give you some examples, we know really kind of the bulk of what we had to deal with was kind of the end of like February into March of 2020. I can say we were having conversations internally as early as January. It helps that we're a large global organization, so we were starting to see things, certainly discussions, but then there are also actions taking place. So it helped that we had kind of a culture of collaboration. I had a very broad and vast network within Brinks. I'm talking about this in the past tense. I still have a broad and vast network within Brinks. And that enabled me to be able to reach out to people within countries who are being directly affected, as well as people in leadership positions to say, here's what I'm seeing. Are you seeing anything similar? How soon do we perhaps need to get together to start discussing what our response should be? What kind of guidance should we start providing within the organization? And like everybody's experience, things did not pan out exactly as we anticipated, right? There were lots of things that, we didn't expect, particularly with regards not just to the pandemic itself, but health authority guidance, decisions by local and country level governments. And like anybody who operated internationally, we had to adjust and accommodate that varying guidance and the various responses that were taking place in different parts of the world. And that's where I feel like Adaptive and our focus on being flexible, our de-emphasis on pre-written procedures and pre-established priorities and objectives really enables us as an organization and working within our culture to work more adaptively, more freely, and more flexibly.
Mark, thank you for that. And, I think when I think of a adaptive BCP and from what you're describing, it is just that. It's flexibility. It is being adaptive. But I think there might be some conceptions or pitfalls among our peers in terms of what it really is, and talking about throwing away the BIA, right, and not doing plans and maybe in the same way. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to share with this audience. Obviously there's an entire book that you have on adaptive BCP and a website, and we'll make sure to link all of that below for those who want to dive in deeper, and we'll make sure at the end to let people know how to connect with you if they want to talk about the concept more. But really thinking about adaptive BCP, can you share what it is, and in a succinct way. Obviously, it's challenging to really bring in a whole methodology in the time we have here, but how would you describe it for those who aren't familiar with it or are really curious?
Sure. I will do my best. It is what really sets it apart from kind of what I consider traditional business continuity planning is there really is not a methodology wrapped around it. It is purely based on principles. So we don't have a life cycle. There's nothing within Adaptive that dictates specific deliverables or specific actions that take place. Really, the idea is in your execution, in your building of resilience and preparedness and continuity capabilities. It's really all about applying those principles. And then, and it's some, I think some people interpret it as just shortcuts, taking the traditional methodology and then just cutting certain things out to speed up the process. It's not that at all. If that's the approach you want to take, perfectly fine. But really, it's not about simplifying the traditional life cycle. It's almost more difficult than the traditional life cycle because you don't get a roadmap to get you from point A to point B. Really, what we're seeking to do is provide people with the tools to navigate the wilderness. It's a compass and a backpack and some basic outdoors skills that you might need to get where you're going, particularly over a period of time. And also with the knowledge that your destination could change as you go through the process. And that's where I think having a roadmap sometimes could be it's a bit of a crutch, but it could also sometimes lead you to the wrong destination because it really is a path to a specific end state when really what you want perhaps is to get somewhere else. And that starts with understanding where you are now and then where's the next best place you can get to. That probably sounded a little convoluted, but hopefully it helped kind of set the picture.
No, I mean, I think I'm tracking you. I'm really stepping into the crisis management area more and more. And with that, I find a lot of interest and reliance on, give us a protocol, give us a procedure. And I always, say, hey, that's fine, but let's keep the critical thinking aspect in place because every situation is different. And I think there's a lot of desire out there from our peers, but also from those we work with to have what I call a recipe book. They want to make a cake, they want to make the chocolate cake every single time. And I have to tell them, well, it might be vanilla and it might be carrot or it might be brownies. We might not be making that at all based on the situation. So at least what I'm hearing, and I know that's a simplistic analogy, but that's really kind of what I'm thinking about. But hey, I want to give you the chance to talk about that a little bit more. No, go ahead, jump in.
So I like the analogy of the cake, right? And that's I think me and my colleague David Lindstedt have mentioned that as well. Think of adaptive, right? The traditional process or methodology. Again, I look at it as baking a cake, and I believe this is my perception and my experience is because you're baking a cake, you have to start with, well, what are all the ingredients and what are all the utensils and appliances you need to bake that exact cake? And that's why we kind of go in saying, I need all of this stuff and we need to do this, and we need to prepare it this way. Adaptive takes a completely different approach in that you're going into a kitchen and saying, what ingredients do I have? What utensils exist? What appliances do I have? And what can I make with that? It might be something very, very simple and it might not be particularly tasty, but you can produce something. And through understanding what you can produce, that's when you can go to management and leadership and say, well, these are the things that we can create with the utensils and the ingredients in our kitchen and our pantry. If you want something that tastes better, if you want something that's more rich and robust, then these are the things that we'll need in order to make something better. And you don't set your end state as a cake. You set your you build incrementally based on what you currently have, and then just add the ingredients and the utensils and the capabilities that you need to produce better and richer products in the future.
So let's unpack that a little bit more. So, we know that our peers, our colleagues out there are incredibly dedicated, and many of them spend a lot of time, especially in the BC and DR world, with, I think it's kind of maybe a little antiquated term, but I'm sure, run books, playbooks, plans. documents, right? Having some type of structure around what we do and how we do it in order to be able to explain and justify, if you will, the time that we spend in the discussions with our peers in the business. So can you talk a little bit more about what are those principles? What are those tools? What would adaptive BCP look like if you were to implement it in an organization?
Let's see. So
we have hours now.
yeah. That's quite. I think first we have to understand that how it gets implemented is going to vary quite drastically from organization to organization, driven by the priorities of leadership, the culture that we encounter, the size of the organization, the products and services they deliver. But I would say really it starts with relationships and collaboration. The first thing we should do whenever we're entering an organization for the first time or we're looking to build a program, go meet with the people either in leadership positions who might have to make decisions, people in middle management who might have to manage the response to an event, as well as the people on the front lines who might actually have to deal with these kinds of events. And first seek to build relationships, right? I think the pitfall that people in any industry tend to fall into is they only build relationships as a consequence of trying to deliver or complete some kind of executable. There's somebody by the name of Dr. Todd Conklin in the emergency and health safety space who talks about you should make building relationships a program strategy. I love that idea. So build relationships, foster collaboration, plans and means to document and procedures, as well as, how do we collect data and then turn around to our leadership or to management and demonstrate that we're doing the work that we're supposed to be doing. And I think that sometimes leads us down the path of creating data and contributing data that I don't think we necessarily need to spend time doing. I would say, and I think you're an advocate of this based on some of what I've read from you, data already exists. In lots of organizations, there's a wealth of data around how products and services are delivered, around sales, around customer engagement, productivity, delivery times. Let's start leveraging that data first and foremost as a means to, going back to my previous analogy that you started, which is understand what are the products and what are the ingredients that exist in our pantry. And we can use that to then better understand and articulate to management and leadership, here's what we have and here's what we're capable of with what we have today. And then through that, analyze, well, what could we potentially do tomorrow? What are the investments we have to make? What are the skills we might need to build? Things of that nature. So the second part of this is just understanding the data that's available and look to leverage existing data without initially contributing to that data or just adding to that data. Because in my view, unless we understand the data that exists and we're just adding to it, we're really just kind of creating noise and we're creating maybe either duplicate or redundant data when we don't have to.
And that gets me to my next question, which is there is a system that you utilize or offer for adaptive BCP. And if I'm going to say it wrong, correct me. It's a Gambit or Gambit?
Gambit, I guess.
What is that? What is that? What does that look like? And how does it help if you're trying or if you have a program in place?
So I'm going to admit I'm not an expert on Gambit. That's my colleague, Dr. David Lindsted's tool. He's developed it.
Got it.
I know a number of folks use it. I do look at it as, from my experience, as really kind of the means of taking existing data to understand the capabilities that exist within the organization. And then through that, then you can kind of take that data, illustrate to management or to the decision makers, here's where we exist, here's where we stand today, and then here are the options or potential solutions that exist for us to build something better tomorrow. That's it at a very, very, very high level.
Okay.
And I would say it's one tool among many. My concern with any tool is that it kind of comes sometimes with its own methodology or its own approach, and you kind of have to adapt to the tool. I always say start with making sure you've got a process and making sure you've got something that you can execute against, and then find the tool that best suits how you're already operating. And I'm more of a fan of big open platforms, whether it's things like Slack or Google Workspace or Teams, things of that nature, good collaboration tools, as well as like good data analytics tools. And I'm thinking of like Tableau or Snowflake. So these are the means, going back to, like I said, collaboration and that data analysis and that data delivery. Those are the tools that I would look at. And if you've got something like a Ganbat that you can then use in the execution of your own work, all the better.
No, I appreciate that. And thank you for sharing that. You know, in order to do adaptive BCP, you don't necessarily need a specific tool, but it itself is adaptable, right? To using, as you said, from the concept, whatever tools you have at hand. And I really liked how you were talking about the relationship building and the collaboration and team building ahead of, right? And that's the preparedness piece ahead of anything happening, to have that framework in place. So how would you suggest for someone who is in the process of implementing adaptive BCP, how would they be doing that? Are they just wrapping it into their overall, how do they build that framework, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Framework in the sense of, like, say, I guess the execution of the work, or framework for building relationships or collaboration?
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit of both, if you don't mind speaking to that.
Sure. I guess I would start, if you want to start by building relationships and fostering collaboration. I'm gonna make one of those statements that's probably going to make some people's blood boil, but I start with eliminating plans. My genuine belief is there's a huge focus on plans and documents and materials within the preparedness space. And I think that's almost counter to relationship building and collaboration, because what it does is it then becomes a template or a document that somebody has to sit on the computer and fill out. If you take that piece out of it, you're forcing people to work with one another. You're forcing people into a room to collaborate and discuss. The output of that might be a document. It might be some kind of reference materials, but you shouldn't start with that. You need to first and foremost start with building those one-on-one relationships, and then making that into a network of people who are then connected with one another, as well as a collaborative environment where those people not only know one another, but they work together on a regular basis. They understand what one another do. They understand one another's strengths and weaknesses. They can help bring other people to the table where you might need to build capability, or where you may need some bench strength to be able to deal with certain types of events. Getting out of the document writing business and the material production business and get into the collaboration business.
It makes me think of the phrase, and I'm probably paraphrasing here, but it's the planning process that's more important than the plans themselves.
Yep.
Really
There's the Eisenhower quote, right?
Saying.
That in battle, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable.
Everything. Yeah, exactly.
Everything.
Thank you. So, hey, my last question for you, because I ask all of my guests, is what does resilience mean to you? And because we've talked about it before, what I would ask, Mark, is has your definition of resilience evolved or changed since the last time we talked?
It has not. I think about 2 years ago, I was thinking about this very seriously, and ever since, I've communicated my view or definition of resilience as a relative measure of a complex adaptive system's ability to deal with the unintended consequences of change. And that's been pretty consistent for a couple of years. I haven't changed it, and I haven't found a definition that I prefer, and I certainly haven't modified that definition myself in the years since. So I'm happy to unpack any of that if you want, but that's I think our previous meeting, I probably covered that in a little bit more depth.
You did. And I'll make sure to link that too if folks want to dive deeper into your own definition of resilience. And the reason I ask it is because we're all working off a little bit of a different slant or lens with it, which makes complete sense. Yep. And I know there are more and more of at least attempts at standardizing what that means. And I have seen, the ISO standard for org resilience, and I'm expecting to see one for operational resilience come out at some point. But I know that's for all of us, it's a starting point, as well as all of the other, association like DRA and BCI and DRJ. that come up with their own spins on it as well. So I appreciate that.
My only concern is I think how we define it really does dictate how we go about it. And I think if we define it as a state to be achieved or a characteristic that organizations have, particularly when we talk about organizations or people being resilient versus not resilient, I think that's always a danger. Every organization has some level of resilience. We just need to understand what that level is and improve upon it. If we're seeking to achieve resilience, that's only, in my opinion, that's only going to drive us down the path of here's the things we need to do to achieve it. And then that just turns into compliance. If those are the things we're going to do to meet that mission, here are the things we now need to execute against. And it takes us out of this more flexible and adaptive approach where it is a relative measure and more something that we want to get to. And again, we're not navigating a path through the wilderness. We're just following a roadmap to a specific destination.
I appreciate that. Hey, is there anything else?
Sorry to have interrupted.
No. And I thank you for elaborating on that. That was great. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with this audience that we didn't get a chance to talk about today?
I don't think so. I think we covered all the fun stuff. And of course, people are always welcome to reach out to me directly. All right. How can they do that? Probably the best place is LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. Just search Mark Armour. You should be able to find me. And I always tell people you can contact me directly via email. It is mnjarmour. My last name spelled ARMOUR @gmail.com. Excellent. Well, thank you, Mark, so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know it's a challenging topic to talk about in a short space, but appreciate it and really recommend for the audience. Want to thank you for being here and really recommend that you read the materials and engage Mark and David Lindstedt and others who are really have been carrying maybe the football down the field. If folks don't mind my American analogy. Maybe kicking the football. Others would kick it. Yep, others would kick it. And see, that's adaptive, right? It all depends on what game you're playing. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you being here. And hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. It was my pleasure. Thanks very much, Ashley.